What is the scariest experience you've had in your life that you believe can only be attributed to the paranormal? Copy-paste from my response to a similar question a couple of years ago. Short non-Pulitzer version. Got lost with girlfriend at night in Waco, Texas. Roads were deserted. No people. No cars. Then saw one lone person standing on the corner as I made a turn. I heard a friendly male voice in the vehicle, as if sitting in the back seat, say to me, "You're going the wrong way." I noticed I was, indeed, going the wrong way on a one-way street, so I did a U-turn. The road took me directly to the main highway. Asked my girlfriend a bit later if she heard the voice too, and she burst into tears because she had been so freaked out by it she thought she was going insane or something. Edit. Well, damn, this blew up a bit. I've posted about it before in response to similar questions, but it's never gotten traction like this. To all those saying it was just the guy on the corner shouting at me, that is logically probably the best description of what actually happened. The only caveat there is that I never drive with my windows down. I hate it. Weird, I know. The voice didn't sound muffled but right next to me. Also, I have no idea why the town, or at least that part of it, was completely deserted, but I have heard that people prefer leaving Waco instead of being in Waco, so that could explain it. A few years ago, the day before my birthday, I had a really weird dream. I was in my mother's kitchen with my mother, only there were no walls and just a dark expanse all around. I walked up to my mother and asked, "So, how did he die?" She replied, "He woke up dead." I woke up at that point, around 4:30 a.m. according to my phone, and wrote this down in my dream journal beside my bed, which I was keeping at the time in an attempt to spur lucid dreaming. A few hours later, maybe after 8, my brother called me crying to say that our Uncle Steve was dead. Apparently, my aunt woke up around 6 a.m. to wake him up for work as usual, only to find him blue-faced and cold in the bed next to her, choked on his vomit. This was a completely unexpected death. He had no medical conditions that would have worried my aunt, never mind the rest of the family. Even the autopsy came back inconclusive. They couldn't find any explanation, medical or chemical, for why he suddenly vomited in his sleep and didn't wake up from it. Though my aunt did say that the coroners estimated he had been dead for between 1 or 2 hours by the time she got up, right around the time I woke up from the woke up dead dream. When I worked at a psych hospital, every morning at roughly the same time you could hear footsteps running down the service hallway. I only took note of this after a couple of weeks of this happening, when I noticed that around 2 a.m. is when it happened, and that afterwards there were never sounds of doors closing or opening. For context, this was in a hallway where there were doors on both ends which were pretty much impossible to close silently due to the latches that were on them. One night it started and I got up and ran to the hallway but didn't see anyone. Looked all around, no one. There were these fisheye mirrors up in the corners between the walls and ceiling that let you see if someone was around the corner or coming up behind you, and one time, the footsteps started but I didn't see anyone in those mirrors when I immediately turned the corner into the hallway. It very well could have been a very quick and sneaky patient. I really don't believe in ghosts, but lots of people swore that place was very haunted, and someone else explained being aware of the footsteps in the hallway and said it was a ghost that had been there for a long time. Either way, it was pretty creepy when it happened at 2 a.m. when everything else was quiet. I got a little unnerved whenever I went to mop that hallway in the early morning hours. What is it with psych wards and paranormal activity? Well, lots of people tend to die in psych wards, and sometimes those deaths are not very peaceful. If ghosts were real, I'd say they'd hang around in places like those. I was either 13 or 14, home alone one evening before my parents got home from work. In my room watching TV when I hear the blinds from our patio door in the kitchen slightly move. I freak out and go take a look and notice them just stopping as I arrive. I am weirded out, but in my head I explain it as a current that passed in the house since our heating is on. As I'm heading back to the room I hear a sharp thump sound as if something has fallen. I'm freaking out as I now think there is someone in the house, but I know there is no way they could have been in the kitchen and then my room without me noticing. I peek inside and see my baseball player statue that has a flat base laying sideways on my dresser. Somehow it got knocked over. I freaking run downstairs, put the TV on full blast as I didn't want to hear anything else, and wait terrified for my parents to get home. After that evening I never experienced anything freaky at all in that house. Man, I would have left the house thinking a real person had crept in. Did your parents notice anything? No, nothing ever really happened after that, and we lived in a triplex. Would have been really hard for an animal to get in. But yes, I was freaking out. I had a teacher in elementary school that I never thought of again. I wake up in the middle of the night all sweaty, but my girlfriend is still watching TV. My girlfriend asks me what happened, so I told her I had a dream about this teacher, that she also knew. Next day I speak to a relative on the phone who gave me the news this teacher died. This was before social media and shit. I did not see it on a Facebook post, for example. I was shook about this for a while. For several years I experienced what is commonly called sleep paralysis. The first experience was one of the most terrifying. I was taking a nap on Christmas Day. I had the common experience of a visceral buzzing in my ear or head, and a feeling of terrible evil coming upon me. I awoke, but couldn't open my eyes or move a muscle. I then felt someone grab onto my feet, and start crawling up my body. I felt completely overcome with evil. Finally I pushed it all back and opened my eyes, and found myself alone. Similar experiences happened for years, each was terrifying, but almost became commonplace. I discovered that it was sleep paralysis, and someone said the best way to deal with it was to give into it, and not to fight it. One day, I was taking a nap on my bed in the basement. My brother was a couple rooms down in our entertainment room. I felt that familiar visceral buzzing. My eyes opened, but I couldn't move. I decided to let go this time, and I gave into it. As soon as I had done that, my body started to sit up. I saw my arm rising, and one thought dominated my mind. I had to kill my brother. I was halfway up, and panic set in, and I pushed back as hard as I could, and eventually woke up panting and terrified. I never gave into it again. It's lessened over the past few years, but every year or so it will come back. My grandmother had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's when I was a teenager. After my grandfather died, she just kept getting sicker. My parents decided to move her in with us so we could keep a closer eye on her. A couple of months later, she accidentally fell and broke her hip. My dad rushed her to the hospital and I stayed home with my mom. My grandmother used to sit in the same spot all day, a big comfy chair in the middle of the living room. At night, after my dad rushed my grandmother to the hospital, I walked through the living room and saw a shadow, a black silhouette of a large man standing behind the big chair. I jumped from fright, and as soon as I took my eyes off of it, it was gone. I thought it was just my imagination, so I brushed it off and ran back to my room. A couple of hours later, I was in my room and my mom was in the living room watching TV when I suddenly heard her scream bloody murder. I ran to the living room. Her hand was on her chest and she was heaving. Her eyes were nearly bulging out. I asked her if she was okay and she said, "I could have sworn I saw your father standing behind that chair." Needless to say, my dad and my grandfather looked eerily alike. Did your grandmother pass away? Unfortunately, in 2012. But not due to the accident. First, a bit of background. When my wife was young, her parents and siblings lived with one set of her grandparents. Her grandfather was murdered in the home. It happened in his bedroom upstairs. The room was used primarily as storage for the next 20+ years. Her parents tried to sell the house multiple times, but living in a small town, everyone knew and the house would not sell, so they stayed. Years later, and while my wife and I were engaged, there was a murder trial which I attended in support of her family. I saw the crime scene photos, important later. Another few years later, we had 2 kids, the oldest was 6 at the time. My wife's family does not talk about the murder, and our kids do not know about the murder to this day. My father-in-law decided he wanted the room where the murder happened to be a hangout for the grandkids when the family was in town. He put sleeping bags and a TV in the room ahead of a holiday, days-long get-together. We didn't like it but stayed silent since the murder was a sore subject. My father-in-law also wanted all the grandkids to all sleep in there together. We were the first to arrive and my son went into the room alone. He usually couldn't sit still long at that age, so after a couple of hours I decided to check in on him. Here is our conversation. During the whole conversation, he was still and rigid and would not look away from the TV. "Hey buddy, is everything okay up here?" "Yeah. Okay, have fun." "Daddy, do I have to sleep in here?" "I don't want to." "Why not?" "I am not alone." Every hair on my body stood up. "Well, yeah, I'm here with you." "No, there is someone in here with us." "Are they nice? Mean? A grown-up? A kid?" "A grown-up." "What are they doing right now?" "They are watching you." "You have never said anything like this at your grandparents' house before, and you have been here a lot." "They don't leave this room and I have never been in here before." "Where are they now?" Without looking away from the TV, he points to the far corner where his great-grandfather was murdered and said, "They are standing over there. They don't move much." "Okay buddy, "You don't have to stay in here," and he left the room with me. My friend's boyfriend committed suicide a few years ago. He played baseball all throughout his youth and high school. His initials were BR, and he always wore number 9. Well, her cable box kept resetting itself one day very shortly after his death, and the error code was BR09. I called the cable company to find out what that error code meant. It didn't exist. The cable box worked fine the next day and from then on. Something similar happened to my dad after my grandmother, my mom's mom, passed. This was back in 2006. One day my dad got a text. There was no return number. All the text said was Kathy, which was my grandma's name. I had a dream when I was 3 years old about being chased through an old house by a man with a chainsaw. The aged green walls and wooden floors are still ingrained in my memory. My only escape was hopping from the second floor down to the first, where I was teleported back in bed with my parents. The particularly spooky part didn't come until years later. My family went on vacation for spring break to some town along the coast. We stayed in a home that was part of an older settlement in Washington state. Upon entering the house, I was freaking out. It was the exact home I had dreamed of years ago, right down to the walls and the staircase. I felt exceedingly uncomfortable for our entire stay. I read in a book a long while later that, unbeknownst to my parents, the neighborhood we were staying in is notably haunted due to some murders that took place there in the 1800s. This is in my mom's life, not mine. Once when she was a kid, she was waiting with her younger sister at the bus stop when she felt a strong craving for a candy bar. She is normally extremely cautious and responsible, but this one time she felt such a strong urge for candy that she decided to run to the nearest convenience store with her sister and get some. By the time they got back to the stop, a driver had lost control of the bus and mowed down a bunch of people there. I've written about this before, but when I was a preteen or young teenager, my family moved into a house. It started with hearing footsteps in the attic, which wasn't tall enough for anyone to walk around in. We attributed it to rats, but it made my grandmother uncomfortable enough that she stopped visiting. We started seeing things, a woman peeking around corners, a little boy running around, and the shadow of a man at the end of the hallway. My dad's bedroom was across the hall from my brother's room, and I often slept in there. Me and 2 of my brothers were watching a movie one night, when I saw a man crawling on his hands and knees into the room. I thought it was my dad, who often did things like this to scare us. I gave the signal that I saw him, and went back to watching the movie, expecting him to grab my little brother's foot. He was sleeping next to me. Then he opened his door, flooding the hallway with light. There was no one there. I've never been so terrified. Freaky. I went to my buddy's grandparents' place and his uncle lived there after they passed away. The uncle said the place was haunted, and one night he was sleeping and heard something in the closet. He said he's seen a woman come crawling out of the closet on his hands and knees and crawl into the hallway. Years ago, I worked at a Walgreens photo desk. A lady came in one day with an old black and white photo of her as a child. She said she used to tell her mom there were devils in the trees around her house, and her mom thought she just had a wild imagination and was making stuff up. She then showed me the photo of her, taken in the 60s, in a white dress and a pretty smile on what looked like a sunny day. But what the fuck is that in the trees? It looked like demon faces all over and around the trees, on the bark, in the branches. Worst case of pareidolia I've ever had. She wanted to make an enlarged copy and said she would give it to her mom to prove she wasn't crazy. That photo still haunts me. Well, I wasn't expecting this one to give me the heebs, but I got that. Could you explain a little more? Like, what did all the eyes look like? Maybe how far apart they were? And what part of the world you were in? If I recall correctly, she grew up on the Arkansas Delta, probably near the Memphis, Tennessee metro, because that's where I live. It's hard to describe the photo, other than it was an old original photo, and the tree bark, and the tree scars where they were once trimmed, and even the tree branches against the backdrop of sky had eerie looking faces. Elongated, devilish looking faces that seemed like some were peeking out from behind the trees. And it was all over the photo. It was weirdly unnatural, and that's the only way to explain it. The lady was a frequent customer, and she seemed hesitant to tell me about the photo, saying she didn't want me to think she was crazy. She said when she was a girl she hated playing out in the backyard because these devils would be all around her from every angle, staring at her, and no one believed her. She didn't like going to her parents' house even as an adult, because she could still see the faces in the trees. And this lady was in her 50s, and still seemed traumatized by this. When she handed me the photo, I was unnerved by it, for sure, Because it's not something you see every day. Back when I just started working in a new town, my best friend was studying at uni one town over. We met once a week in the cinema in her town to the sneak preview. One night after the film was over, we said our goodbyes and I hurried to my car to drive home. When I rolled off the parking lot, I was hit by the thought, well, wouldn't it be nice to take the country road home instead of the highway? I shook my head, wondering where that thought came from, because taking that way would at least double the time I needed to go home and I had to go to work early next morning. So I headed towards the highway anyway. I'd never been scared of driving before or after that night, but I was almost shaking with fright when I rolled onto the highway. The road was quite empty, but eventually I closed up to a truck. On any normal day I'd just overtake it, but I couldn't bring myself to do so. Somehow that truck meant safety to me. Thoughts crossed my mind about what the last thoughts of people getting hit by wrong-way drivers are. Again, no idea where they came from. Right before I reached my exit, a wrong-way driver passed us by. As of today, I have not found a logical reason for my fear that night. I didn't listen to the radio, I had a CD playing. There wasn't music or radio in the cinema as well, and it was well before the time of smartphones. Something or someone warned me. I ordered a really cool stereo by mail. My older brother said he'd assemble it when it arrived. He was living in his own place at the time. I told him all I wanted to hear on that stereo was Heartbreaker by Led Zeppelin. Came home one day from work one day and heard that song wailing through the streets from 2 blocks away, and I knew my stereo had arrived. Years later, after my brother passed away, I decided to unbox and use his very expensive stereo system. Realized I couldn't put it together, so I hired a guy to do it for $50. While he was putting it together, I was telling him about my Heartbreaker old stereo story. He finally said, "Okay, when I put this last wire in it should work." As you can guess, the song that came blasting out of those awesome Bose speakers was Heartbreaker. That guy freaked out and flew out of my house. Flew. Didn't take his money. Didn't say goodbye, just gone. I still miss my brother some 30 years later. I have other stories, but that's my favorite. My mother was an extremely active and healthy woman. One night I had a dream that we were in the hospital with all these doctors and she was diagnosed with a cancer in the throat. I remember the sound was muffled in my dream, but they kept pointing to my mother's throat. The dream was too vivid, and when I woke up I immediately messaged my mother to go to the doctor. She brushed me off and thought it was funny. About 8 months later she went to the doctor for a cold that wouldn't go away and was diagnosed with an aggressive form of thyroid cancer and unfortunately passed away within a month. I still sometimes look at that message and wish I was more persistent. Edit, here's the screenshot of the message. Edit 2. For those of you commenting about the active 15 minutes ago, I took a screenshot of this message when she was still alive and still using Facebook to send it to my sister. Here's a current screenshot of the conversation where none of the messages send through because her Facebook isn't active anymore. Sorry for your loss. Thank you.